Hi everybody, it's me, the Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there is Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
So let me try again. Aloha, everyone, and welcome to Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Sorry, I had myself on mute. I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin, and today we're going to interview Fred Burks. And before I bring him on, I will tell you a little bit about Fred. Fred Burks, before resigning from the U.S. State Department in 2004 due to excessive secrecy demands, Fred Burks served many years as a language interpreter for presidents and other dignitaries. He interpreted for G.W. Bush, Clinton, Gore, Cheney, and many other top officials of the U.S. and other countries. Having participated in numerous secret meetings where the only people allowed were the principals and their interpreters, he has acquired important inside information and contacts. After receiving a wealth of eye-opening information on major cover-ups from respected fields and colleagues, Fred was inspired to develop this website that he has in October 2002. Continually opening to divine guidance, Fred has dedicated himself both to getting the word out about the cover-ups and to inspiring others to help transform ourselves and our world through love and empowerment. He is currently executive director of the Peers Network, which is PEERS, network of websites, and manager of wanttoknow.info. And Fred has also helped develop and foster several inspiring communities and websites, including Moment of Love and free personal growth courses. And we have links to his courses. I'm going to add some more links on my aquariumradio.com site, where I have a bio for Fred. And Sasha, do you want to say something before we bring on Fred?
Oh, we'd like to, my radio people would like to know, and I'd like to know what's been covered and what to do. And just on the outside chance, I'd like to know if you saw the interview and you have any ideas of North Korea and how, what are we covering up there?
Yeah, we just watched the interview. So, Fred, welcome to our show, and do tell us more about yourself. I know I didn't have your most recent bio up. There might be some things that you want to focus on to tell our listeners about yourself and your incredible work. Oh, and just one more thing, Fred. I just want to tell the world, we've known Fred for a long time. We've been at some of the workshops together and conferences, so we can talk a lot about a lot of stuff on this show. Welcome, Fred. Thank you so much for coming today.
Great to connect with you, Janet and Sasha. It's been a little while, and it's great to be on the show. Exciting times we live in, and Happy New Year to you and to all of our listeners.
Yes, Happy New Year. So what would you like to tell our listeners about yourself before we get into our topics of discussion today?
I guess the main thing I'll just say is that I've been deeply committed my entire life to living in service to all of us, to all humanity and all beings, and doing what I can to help shine light into the shadows. I'm sure all your listeners know that there's some deep shadows on this planet, and we shine light on it so that we can expose what's going on. I have no doubt that transformation happens, and it is happening all the time.
Wonderful. So what would you like to focus on? You have such a diverse life. I'm very interested in your experiences as an interpreter and what you uncovered or what you discovered, whatever you want to say, during those years leading into this now, because those are some top people, Cheney, Bush, Clinton, Gore.
Sure. Well, it was quite fascinating. I started working with the State Department in 1986 with a program called the International Visitor Program, where I took people on study tours of the U.S. various topics, and eventually moved up the ranks. And 1995 was the first time I did presidential level interpreting. And it was really fascinating to see how everything is coordinated. You'd be amazed, for instance, whenever the president would visit Indonesia, they would send an advance crew months ahead of time to start preparing things. And about a week ahead of time, there'd be several hundred people all staying in one hotel focusing on this one visit. I was there one time. It was just a 4-hour visit to Bali with G.W. Bush was visiting President Megawati at the time. I think it was 2003. And for a 4-hour visit, they brought me in several days early because they wanted to make sure I was there and not jet lagged. And by the time I got there, which was like 3 days early, there was 500 people in this one hotel arranging a 4-hour visit. So it's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just crazy to see the level of protection. Now, half of those people were security people. So that in itself was wild. And then you see how the president's schedule is arranged and stuff. And, it's a big show. And, what you find out that a big piece of what government does is they have to look good, and they know this. And so a big piece of everything that's done is like making everything look good.
So what languages do you know?
Well, I was qualified in Indonesian and Chinese, but my Mandarin Chinese, eventually I let it go. It got rusty and focused mostly on Indonesian. I still do occasional private interpreting gigs in Indonesian, but I resigned from the government in 2004 because of excess secrecy demands.
Okay. You'll have to tell us what that means. And so how did you become an interpreter?
Oh, well, Fred, you mentioned Indonesia. We've got a brand new government and a whole new ball game. Can you give us a picture of where Indonesia's going now?
Well, yeah, I'm very excited because this new president, it's a big shift from the past. He is known as the anti-corruption guy. He was the governor of Jakarta for the last few years, and people were very excited because he's one of the few people who's willing to kick butt on corruption. So I'm actually very excited to have a really progressive leader there in the head of Indonesia, which is the 4th largest nation population-wise in the world.
Okay, I guess, because I'm an anthropologist, I've been very concerned with New Guinea and with the treatment of the natives of New Guinea by the Indonesian government has been appalling. I don't know if you're aware of that situation.
I'm very aware.
And I hope there's going to be some change in that direction. I don't know if you heard anything.
I have not heard anything along those lines. But, the thing is when a president comes to power, there is a whole huge apparatus that he's dealing with. So it's not like the president can just change things like that. And, his name is Joko Widodo, so and people call him Jokowi. So if Jokowi tries to do too much too quickly, he's probably going to have big problems. But I haven't heard anything yet as far as New Guinea. I certainly know about the huge gold mine there and the way they oppress the local peoples.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so and also I guess since we're jumping this thing, are you familiar with this stuff with the interview and all this is caused with North Korea?
Oh, sure, it's crazy.
What's your take on it?
Well, it's fascinating because it's very clear that this was planned in advance. They already have all these sanctions ready to go. And yet now we're finding, even in the mainstream media, they're reporting that there is very flimsy evidence that it was North Korea who pulled it off. It's more likely that it was an inside job, and numerous media are actually talking about this openly, which I think is amazing and exciting.
So it's just another false flag, an opportunity to apply sanctions that they want to apply anyhow.
Well, we know that North Korea has been in the radar sites, since before 9/11. It's one of the countries that, the evil, what they used to call it, the evil triangle or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I just want to give a couple of background things, and we're jumping ahead, but that's okay. We can jump wherever we want to. It's just the flow of consciousness. How did you get into being an interpreter and learning Chinese and Indonesian? You're an American, right? And Americans typically don't really
Born and raised.
learn.
Basically, I was in college, and I was actually getting really frustrated with college because it's just the traditional education system wasn't doing it for me. And I was becoming more and more disillusioned. And then I heard I was at UC Santa Cruz, which is a pretty progressive and good college, but still it was being frustrating for me. And I heard about this great program that sends people overseas for a cultural experience, and you teach English. And so I applied, was thrilled to apply and get accepted. And in 1981, I went and lived for a year on the island of Borneo and taught English there at the Department of Health, and had a fantastic experience. Lived with an Indonesian family, 20 people under one roof. It was a true extended family with the father was a doctor, so he was pretty well off, but the grandparents were there, cousins, aunts, uncles, and it was a great way to learn Indonesian. So it was a lot of fun, and they were also very pious Muslims, and I got to see some of the best of Islam living with them. So it was a fantastic experience. And then eventually I went back home, worked for a year, and then I went off to China with the same program. And China was just opened to foreigners back then. In fact, the organization I went with, which was called Volunteers in Asia, was the very first volunteer organization to be invited into China. So I went there in 1983 when it was still pretty communist, even economically. And by the time I left in 1985, I was there 2 years. It had changed quite a bit, and people were wearing suits and ties and all sorts of big changes. So I had some fascinating times living in both Indonesia and China. Then when I came back in 1986, I heard about this international visitor program I mentioned that they invite key people, relatively young people with a bright future, to come over and do a 1-month study tour of the country, and they need interpreters for that. So I applied and got accepted and started an 18-year career with the U.S. Department of State. It was quite a fascinating journey.
So how did you get from there to this website wanttoknow.info, which is conspiracy based? What did you want to know? What did you find out? Because this is one of the older sites. What year was that created?
2003.
Yeah, right. So it's been around for a while. So tell us how you got from an interpreter to wanttoknow.info.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty interesting story. I was actually a debunker because I had some friends, including my housemate. I still lived in the same house 15 years ago. And my housemate was telling me about all these conspiracies, and I'm like, nah, this is before 9/11. And I said, listen, I've been in these top secret meetings with presidents and other dignitaries, and I have not seen any signs. Of course there's conspiracies, there's corruption everywhere. We all know that, but not at the level that, a lot of people were talking about. And it actually wasn't until 6 weeks before 9/11 when a very good friend sent me a video of the National Press Club conference put on by Stephen Greer, where there were 22 high-level government and military witnesses testifying to a huge UFO cover-up. And when I watched this, I knew nothing about all this. So I put this video in, and I'd been to the National Press Club as an interpreter and knew that this was an incredibly prestigious organization. And the fact that they had 22 witnesses, it just blew my mind. By the time I ended up watching the end of this video, my jaw was on the floor, and I went, oh, my God, the world is not what I thought it was. And so that's what started me on the quest just 6 weeks before 9/11 to find out what was really going on in the world. And after that, I actually went and I applied to work as Dr. Greer's assistant. I flew back to his home and I had dinner there with him. That didn't work out. He's a great guy, but he's not easy to work with. So anybody who knows him knows that. But he's a great guy. Yep. So, but he's great because he said, well, if you really want to know what's going on in the world, you need to, go look at Michael Rupert's website and you need to read this book and look at this and that. So, I followed his advice and was like, oh my God, I just felt like I swallowed the red pill and started going down the rabbit hole and finding out all these amazing, crazy things going on in the world that I had no idea even existed just the year before. And then what happened as far as the website goes, it's like I said, all right, so now I'm learning like the world, I've been deceived my whole life. At the time I was, 42, 43, and I had no idea any of this craziness was going on. And I had worked at the highest levels of government, so it's really crazy. So I started scouring the internet and I said, I hope somebody is covering all these topics with a focus on reliable, verifiable information, because that's what I always want. I want the most reliable, verifiable information you can get so that I can trust what I'm looking at. And I saw lots of great websites on specific things like focusing on the media cover-up, on UFOs, on new energy, lots of individual great websites, but nobody was putting the whole thing together that I could find anywhere because I wanted to support them if they were. And I was kind of bummed. I was hoping, because I didn't want to do this, I wanted to support somebody. But as nobody was doing it, I said, okay, I got to do it. And so that's how wanttoknow.info got started.
Wow. So, Josh, you have a question?
No, what did you find out was going something? You're prefacing this before 9/11, so I got it that 9/11 must have been a turning point in your life book.
Oh yes, thank you. That's a very good point. So, I found out about the UFO cover-up 6 weeks before 9/11, and then I started getting way deep into that. I read Stephen Greer's disclosure book, which blew my mind. So by then I already knew that, whoa, I had been deceived, and we are being deceived in a big way that I did not know. So when 9/11 happened, I had this knot in my stomach, and at first, the first two towers got hit, and it was like, whoa, this is really weird. But I didn't quite know what to make of it. But then my girlfriend called me. I went over a place where we're watching TV, and then 45 minutes after the first one hit, suddenly the Pentagon gets hit. And I said, wait a minute. Immediately, I turned to my girlfriend and said, no way. There's no way that terrorists could have pulled this off. I had worked with top generals in the U.S. government and top generals in the Indonesian government, and I can tell you, the U.S. generals had bragged to the Indonesians that we track every plane everywhere in the U.S. anytime, and we can tell you at any time a plane goes off its flight, we can be on it in 10 minutes. And so tell me that 45 minutes after the two World Trade Centers have been hit, a plane goes into the Pentagon. That's impossible. Knowing the capabilities of the military. And so I immediately knew, I suspected somehow it was allowed to happen for a greater purpose, some sort of scheme that was going on. So
a similar thing happened to me like that. I had worked for the military on Johnston Atoll, and we timed how long it took a plane to get from Honolulu, 800 miles to Johnston Atoll. When we were literally sitting there with a timer. And they'd say, okay, we're leaving. It took 8 minutes to go 800 miles.
Wow. Huh.
So I knew that was bullshit because I worked in the military. So if you're having an aha, because you've had government contacts and inside, you were an insider, and I was, there. How many people around the planet are having this aha?
Oh, absolutely.
Nobody said anything.
So I knew when Muhammad Atta's Quran was found intact that something was fishy.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff around it. And if you think about it, remember the whole Star Wars thing, the Strategic Defense Initiative. They had developed rockets that were supposed to be able to take out missiles. Now, missiles travel 10 times the speed of airliners. They don't have any transponders, and yet they're able to track them and shoot them down. Now, sometimes they weren't successful, but the fact that these things are 10 times the speed of planes, they have no transponders, and they're able to shoot them down, And you're telling me we couldn't get these lumbering planes? It's just common sense. But, it's an emotional thing. People were so emotional that they weren't thinking straight. And so it was very easy
how did
to
you
read
react
people.
Do about that when you realized that? What happened next?
I'm sorry?
So when you realized this was a stand down, what did you do?
Oh, well, I tell you, I remember I was sitting there with my girlfriend. I said, "Oh, this changes everything." I said, I'm going to have to focus full time on dealing with what's going on, because somebody is doing something huge on this planet that is not okay, and I'm going to do my very best to stop it. So it was very sobering for me. I sat there and was like, whoa, this changes everything. And that's what really, got me on the path. And I just started focusing, okay, so what can I do? How can I help to expose this? And that's where, Mike Rupert's website was very good, fromthewilderness.com. You guys are probably familiar with that. And then I just started pulling together information, started connecting with people. It's because I was still working with the State Department at that time. When I would go on trips, sometimes, people would say, "Oh, so what do you do besides interpreting?" I said, "Well, I expose major government cover-ups." I would just say it just like that. What do you do besides interpreting? I expose major government cover-ups. And it was so fascinating. About 2/3 of the people were like, "Oh, thank you," and change the topic. But about 1/3 of the people would go, "Wait a minute, what, blah, blah, blah." And one guy was slipping me papers under the door, and people were giving me information. So it was kind of cool to be doing this work. Well, I didn't resign until 2004 from the State Department. So I still did another couple of years, and I would tell people all the time, my boss at the State Department, I talked with her about the UFOs, and she was quite fascinated.
Oh, wow. So
it's obvious to anybody that examines the information that it's overwhelming, that it's an inside job, and it was partly staged so that George Bush could kill Iraqis and curtail civil liberties further with an act of patriotism, so-called, that had been planned way in advance. But what Jim Marr says is, so what? So what? We know it. The people in authority just go on with their murder programs.
But you know what? It's to this date, if everybody knew this, they could not go on with it. And so the fact that it's not being reported in the major media is huge, which is why what I do on wanttoKnow.info is there's literally there's thousands of media reports that expose pieces of the puzzle of 9/11. And so I wanttoKnow.info, if you click on the 9/11 section, we actually have links to every article that starts questioning the official story. And you put it all together, and it's like really blatant, so that even a skeptic, as long as they're not too emotionally attached, even a skeptic has to look at this stuff and go, wait a minute, there's something going on here that we're not being told. So I think it is important that we educate people, because if enough people know what's going on, it'll stop. It has to stop.
It has to stop. So it's what, 14 years later, so you were on this path. Tell us what are the highlights of what you've discovered since you began this journey.
Well, I'm sure you guys experienced the same thing I did. It's like the deeper you go, the more you go, holy, Jesus. It just gets crazier and crazier, and pretty soon you almost don't know what to start believing. But thankfully, there have been lots of really good people, like John Perkins come out and wrote Confessions of a Economic Hitman, which was great for exposing stuff. Lots of people have been quite courageous in speaking out, insiders, and you start reading their stories, and you can start getting a picture. And part of what I discovered is that, yes, there is this incredibly powerful elite that tries to keep pretty well hidden, the Bilderberg Group and the Trilateral Commission, all those guys. And yet these elite they are factions. And these factions are vying for power all the time. They work very closely together to try to keep their work secret, but they're fighting for power, and that there's different groups fighting against each other. And
what are the factions? Have you identified the?
Sure.
Dr. Les and I go back to Anunnaki, but I want to get your information. What are the factions that you've identified?
Well, I think the most dangerous factions are one that I call the Armageddonists. They're the ones who really want a third world war to happen and the most of the population of the planet to be destroyed. And they want third world war to start out of Jerusalem and all of that. And that was part of the plan of 9/11 from my own research. But they failed. They had hoped to get martial law with 9/11. But the fourth plane didn't go into the Congress, which is where I think it was meant to go. Because if it had hit Congress and killed a few Congress people, they instantly would have declared martial law. Once martial law happens, Congress has no power. The president becomes dictator. That's the law. That's the way it works. But they failed.
So you think the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania was heading to Congress?
I suspect that. I don't know that for certain, but it makes sense because what I know is they were trying to get martial law. And the easiest way to do that would have been, they could have gone for the White House, but if it didn't kill the president, it'd be easier to go into Congress and kill at least a few congressmen. And then they probably...
A lot of the evidence on that plane was that it was the plane that it was supposed to be landed in. Another plane that was on autopilot was flown in. It did not seem like the flight that it was pretended to be. And the bizarre story about them killing stewardesses with box cutters. This is just nonsense, I think.
Well, that's all what's called a contingency plan. And so what happens if you're planning a huge plot like this, and so you think about that this is a huge plot, 9/11, if you have contingency plans that if this doesn't happen, this will kick in. And so all three other flights were successful, so you hear very little. There's a couple phone calls or whatever, and some of those are even questionable. But suddenly, why does this one flight have all of these calls? Well, it's because it failed. So they kicked in the contingency plan, which is this whole story, which, yes, I agree, it's made up. Cell phones didn't work from that height. It's very well,
right.
Some of these cell phone calls went on for, 10 minutes. You can't do that. Even to this day, it's not. You can't do that unless the plane has a special thing set up.
Well, what happened to both planes? What happened to the Pentagon plane and the Pennsylvania plane? There was insufficient.
No plane at the Pentagon. It was a missile.
No bodies in Pennsylvania. No plane at the Pentagon. No plane. Yeah. So what about?
Well, I honestly don't know. I think, unfortunately, that whether a plane went into the Pentagon or not is used to divide the 9/11 movement. People get so focused on fighting against each other. It was a plane. No, it wasn't a plane, and that doesn't serve us. Yeah, I don't think we can say, I know the truth, because if we say, I know the truth, then it's like everybody's going to fight against each other. We can present the evidence and say, well, it looks like maybe this or maybe that, but let's work together to get more evidence out so that it becomes convincing.
Well, I want to get back to the factions. So, number one is the Armageddonists. Now, are they the ones, that might be behind the one,
Yeah, the neocons.
Well, no. I'm trying to think. What was that? The interview. These people might want to get us going into World War III with North Korea.
Right.
They're trying to get somebody upset with us to launch the war, the next war. Do you think that might be part of it?
Well, the Armageddonists are out of power. They have lost a lot of power. 9/11 failed, basically, is the way I look at it. As I said, because martial law wasn't declared, and they thought that maybe they could keep it going and do something else to get martial law declared, but they were not successful. And what happened is there's a lot of the other elite, when they realized that these Armageddonists were the ones who actually pulled off 9/11, which they did within a couple of years, they're all, no way. And so I think the Armageddonists have been pushed from power. Not that they don't have any power, but they've become a weaker faction of the elite when actually they were the strongest at the time of 9/11. Which is why some of my friends are less worried now about things.
Is it the banksters that are now ascendant?
Well, the banksters are related to all this. The banksters, they want war. War brings huge profits. All the elite know this. War brings huge profits. And so all of the factions are aware of that and will use that to their advantage. But not all the people in the elite are wanting to support that agenda, but they all know that that's true. And so, it's not neat and easy. You can't just paint an easy picture and say, well, it's just this faction, because there's overlap, there's infiltration. It's like the CIA. The CIA doesn't know who they can trust because they're infiltrated all the time by other intelligence services. And you can't just say, the Koreans want this and the Americans want this.
Are there any factions among the elite that are loving and spiritual?
Well, I would say that there are individuals that are loving and spiritual, I would not say overall that any of the factions are. I'd say there's definitely the faction that is more environmentally conscious. And so you'll see that, and I think they have more power right now. And so we're seeing a little bit more focus on the environment. And they're different than Armageddonists.
Are these any individuals that you can identify? Like since you worked for the Clintons, you probably met.
Well, Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld were definitely big in the Armageddonists, and they worked with the CIA and the Likud and all of that kind of stuff. But the Rockefellers were also another faction to the whole North American banking type, oil type thing. And then there's, the Russians have their own faction. As you know now, the Russian-Chinese axis is becoming very strong. And so this,
right.
they've been, the Russians have been a faction for a while, but it seems like they're really more, for a while the Russians and Chinese weren't even talking to each other. They hate each other. Now they're coming together to sort of work against the current agenda, represented by Obama and his whole gang. But I'll tell you a thing to be excited about is Elizabeth Warren. I'm sure you guys are watching her. She's amazing, and we all had great hope for Obama, and of course he got compromised. But I think it's going to be harder to compromise Elizabeth Warren if she gets in there. And of course,
Bernie Sanders is strong too.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders stands less of a chance, but he's great. But I think Elizabeth Warren really has a real shot. All the polls are showing that Elizabeth Warren is ahead of Hillary Clinton. That's
wow.
Okay.
Yes, in the major media they say now Elizabeth Warren is saying she doesn't want to run, but it's kind of like there's enough people saying you got to run. She may do it.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, she's awesome because, as you know, she's the only one who will literally directly confront the bankers. Just, she'll talk right to them. What the hell are you doing? And why are you doing this? Look what you're doing to the American people. And they basically have the tails between their legs, the banksters.
Wow, that sounds so cool.
Yeah.
So you're thinking that if they pressure her, she'll run. What makes you think she's the best? What are her qualities and characteristics that makes you think she's the best candidate?
Well, she's the only one who's standing up to power. I mean, she's standing up to the bankers, which Obama clearly is not, and she's really standing for the people. So I'm not saying she's perfect, but
right.
I think as you know, Hillary Clinton is deeply involved in part of the whole deal. So, and Elizabeth Warren is not. You really can check her out, and she's pretty clean.
So it looks like I'm hoping that we at least have a female president, but are we truly going to get a woman president and that's going to act like a woman, or is she just going to be, mimicking what the guys do, being the same old?
Yeah, she's very excited.
She's come from her heart. I can feel her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's amazing that we got an African American president. Of course he got compromised, and we could talk about that, but the fact that we got an African American president is huge, and that is alone is just awesome.
How did he get compromised?
How did he get compromised in your mind?
Well, this is a question. I know how the possibilities. Everybody talks about the talk. Once you become a president, you get pulled into a certain room by the people who really have power and say, "You think you have power? Let us tell you a few things." And so immediately they're put into place. And what I know is that anybody who's in serious power, like let's say that Obama is going to try to go against these guys. Well, here's what they do. They say, your pet dog. Watch what happens to your pet dog. And like within a few days, they find out their pet dog has cancer. It's like, and say, and guess what? Guess what's going to happen to your daughters if you don't listen to us? So this
wow.
But that's what it seemed. It seemed that's what happened to Obama. I pictures after the talk.
Yes, I suspect something like that. It might not have been that, but in some way he was definitely compromised, and he knows that he can only fight certain battles, and he's not going to fight the war machine. And you can see he's almost never stood against the war machine.
Right. So what's going to be any different with Elizabeth Warren?
The war in Afghanistan. That was his initial program. He said, "I'm going to extend the war in Afghanistan."
Well, he was against the war when he was running for president, I mean, so he was
Right.
both Guantanamo and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So he had all these ideals that may have been true, and then he becomes president and he gets to talk, and now he's telling the party line. What's going to prevent that from happening with the next one?
Well, yeah, it could happen to somebody like Elizabeth Warren. It totally could. And yet, I think there's been enough changes. What's happening is because people like you and me are working to expose this stuff all the time, people are waking up. And I can tell you that among the elites, they're waking up more rapidly than the regular public, because the elite has access to information that the regular public doesn't. And so a lot of people in the elite have gotten pissed at how it got out of control. And Greer talks about this too, and he says, that there are the more benign people among the elite, and when that group becomes more dominant and the old conservatives die off, we're going to see some real changes. I'm actually very excited and optimistic about the future.
That's good to hear.
That's why I like to, the first hour, kind of do all the dark stuff and then turn it around to the light.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're kind of diving into it and getting your concepts, because you worked with these people. You see how they operate. I know they didn't tell you their secrets, but you still had an inkling of how their personalities and who they were. Did you ever hear anything or get wind of anything when you were doing all this interpreting work?
I did. And in fact, you guys may not know, I ended up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal for being a whistleblower in 2005.
Wow.
No, didn't know that.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, basically, let's see. So I was at a meeting in 2002, I believe it was 2002, 2003, 2002. I got a call from the woman who's the Asia expert on the National Security Council, who I had worked with before. And she said, we have this top secret meeting happening in Indonesia this weekend. And she said, can you get on a plane tomorrow to fly to Jakarta, interpret? And I said, sure. And it's funny because we're talking on the phone, and I'd worked with her once or twice before. She's Karen Burks. And she said, you do have secret clearance, don't you? And I said, actually, I don't, because I never did get secret clearance. That's a story in itself. And she said, oh, shit. She literally said, oh, shit. And she said, can you keep a secret? I said, sure. So, it's funny. I wasn't sworn to secrecy, but I did tell her I'd keep the secret. I actually called and apologized later because I did not keep the secret. But so I went to this meeting, and basically it was in the private home, not the presidential palace, but the private home of Megawati Sukarnoputri, who was president at the time. And I knew her from, having interpreted for her for a couple of times, and she really liked me. So I'm interpreting there, and let's see, it was the Ambassador Ralph Boyce, Karen Burks from the National Security Council, me, and then this woman who was presented as the personal envoy of Bush. And this woman happened to acknowledge to me over dinner that she was a CIA agent. So it's quite fascinating. And basically what they did is they started talking to Megawati, and they said, we need you to render, which means to secretly turn over, to render this guy Abu Bakr Bashir to us. So, and basically they wanted to send him off to Guantanamo to use him for their own purposes. And basically this guy Abu Bakr Bashir is kind of like a Pat Robertson or an Oral Roberts, very charismatic, and he's well known in Indonesia. He wants to have a Muslim state. He definitely does not want democracy. He wants a Muslim state run by Islamic laws. So it's not like he was some good progressive guy, but he was being manipulated heavily, and they were trying to turn him into the Osama bin Laden of Southeast Asia. So that clearly was the agenda. But what the power elite want to do is you get people focused on good and evil, and you want to have the head of evil. Osama bin Laden was the representation of evil. Hitler was the representation of evil. So you make people as evil as possible so that people really hate them, and then you can forward your agenda. So they were trying to capture this guy, but Megawati's response totally surprised them and surprised me. She said, I cannot turn him over to you. And she'd done this with another guy in the past who wasn't so well known. But She said, I can't do that. He's too well known, and eventually it's going to get back to me, and it's going to damage my career.
Wow.
I can tell you, they all were silent for a moment. It was really like they were shocked, and I was shocked that she was standing up to the U.S. and saying, no, I'm not going to do this. And basically, I think it was the envoy who said, well, if you don't turn him over, there's going to be problems. So it was basically a veiled threat.
Uh-huh.
And Megawati's response was pretty interesting. She said, well, I hope this doesn't lead to the severing of the good relationships between our two countries.
Wow.
It was huge. It was a big deal. And, you know, when the meeting was over, they told me, is that what she really said? It's like, yep, that's what she said.
Uh-huh.
They kind of couldn't believe it. And, and by the way, I think when they said there's going to be problems, I'm not remembering clearly. I've written it down. This is up on the internet. And I think it was like within a couple months, there's going to be problems. Guess what happened 6 weeks after that meeting?
What?
The Bali bombing.
Oh,
and Megawati had said the only way I could capture him and give him to you is if public opinion turns against him. That's what she said. And so 6 weeks later, Bali bombing, and guess who gets pinned as the mastermind for the Bali bombing?
Oh my gosh, another.
You got it, exactly. And it's like, oh my God, this is all just too convenient. And the FBI was all over the Bali bombing. And so they definitely turned this guy, and then he did get arrested. Interestingly, he never got surrendered to the U.S. He was in Indonesian jail. And so then what happened was many Indonesians know, particularly the more educated and elite Indonesians, know that the U.S. and Europe wanted to make this guy into something more evil than he was. And so people already suspected that manipulation was going on. And so what happened was the guy was going on trial shortly after I resigned. And I didn't even know this. I wasn't following it closely. But shortly after I resigned, this guy was being tried for terrorism. Now, what happened was when I resigned from the State Department in 2004, I had kept that meeting a secret because it wasn't big enough to blow the whistle right then. You know, I wanted to see if I could find more stuff. But once I resigned, I realized, this could be real news. A presidential interpreter resigns because of secrecy. So I had some press contacts, and I sent out a bunch of emails saying, potential story, a presidential interpreter resigns because of secrecy. And anyway, it got picked up. It was reported widely. And the Washington Post actually reported on it, and their reporter was talking to me, and he said, so are there any secrets you want to share? And I thought, well, you know, I resigned now, and I never even signed a secrecy thing, so I told him this story that I just told you. And I went, oh. And so he put it in just one paragraph in the story about a presidential interpreter resigning. He said, Burks was at a secret meeting where it happened in one paragraph. Well, that one paragraph ended up making front-page headlines in Indonesia. And I got some calls from my friends in Indonesia saying, what's going on, blah, blah. And then they told me, oh, this guy's being on trial. And I got a call from his personal lawyers, who are very well-known, excellent lawyers, saying, would you come over and be willing to testify at his trial?
Wow.
And, you know, this is an international terrorism trial being watched by worldwide because this guy was a big deal. And I said, I don't need you guys to pay me anything, but if you'll pay my airfare and expenses, I'm happy to go through that. And so basically, long story short, I went and did that, and that's how I ended up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, because they're saying, what is it with this presidential interpreter who's blowing the whistle on this meeting? And so the fascinating thing out of that was that there were two reporters who talked to me for about 2 to 3 hours on the phone from Washington Post. I can almost remember the names, Andrew Higgins and Jay Solomon. I was talking to them for 2 or 3 hours, and they were really kind of grilling me in a way that I liked. And I didn't hide anything. And I actually told them, I have this website, you can go look at it, and I have this information, that's solid information on UFOs and 9/11 and all this stuff. And I wasn't trying to convince them. I was telling them, if you really want to know what's going on, here it is. And I also said, I know you guys, because of the Wall Street Journal, are supposed to tear me down. I just ask that you're honest. And what happened was that they waited like several weeks, and they kept emailing me and saying, is this right, and is this right? They wanted to get their facts all right, which I really appreciated. And when the article came out on February 22nd, 2005, my dad is the one who called me. A friend of his said, look at the front page of the Wall Street Journal. I was like, holy, because even they didn't know it was going to be on the front page. The writers don't determine that. But
right.
Anyway, so the article was amazing in that on the one hand, it really tried to tear me down because that's what we're supposed to do. But on the other hand, they were really defending me at the same time. They had quotes like my boss at the State Department saying, he's gone off some deep end. And yet in another paragraph said, she said he's the best interpreter they had at the State Department. And it's like, wait, there's hundreds of interpreters and the best Indonesian interpreter. And
wow.
So it was a fascinating article. And I found out later through some supporters of mine that both of these reporters really like my work now and they're following it. And, they're telling their friends. And Jay Solomon is a very well-established reporter at the Wall Street Journal. So, he's informed other friends of his there. And this is, one of the ways that the elite is waking up, because, as I say, people like me and others are standing up, and they're informing key people like these Wall Street reporters who are telling their friends. And I'm telling you, it's spreading, and the elite are much more in the know now than the general public. And that's why I'm very optimistic and think things are changing.
I am too. I feel it on a core level that something is happening, and I think it's because everything we do is going into the morphogenic field, into the grid. It's a non-local universe, and so while it seems like we're just isolated and we're all little victims, but this grid that's created through us communicating, like this show, Revolution Radio is broadcasting 24/7 on two different studios, A and B.
And I'm sure
you talking.
Yes, you guys must remember that it used to be there was rogue radio stations because it was illegal to have a radio station unless it was approved by the FCC. And so nobody could get any of this kind of information out. This is where the internet is playing a huge role. The fact that you and I are talking and anybody in the world can listen to us right now, that was totally impossible just 20 years ago. So this is super exciting how the internet allows us to get the truth out to those who really want to know.
We're undercutting the institutions. It's the institutions like the Congress and offices. These are corporate groups or corporate positions that endure longer than individuals, and they basically try to dampen down any kind of perturbation or change. And the internet is allowing such huge perturbations that they have become irrelevant because people can see that participation in the institutionalized government is a waste of time.
Yes,
it doesn't work. You withdraw from it.
Yep. And you know what it is? Is people in the past, they really felt like they were powerless, and the president is the one with the power. Congress is the one with the power. We are powerless. Internet is causing us to realize, wow, we all have power. And so as we don't see them as having so much power and we see ourselves have much more power, as Janet said, the morphogenic field changes and conforms, and boo, here we are. Things are really shifting as a result.
Right. It seems like it's just going at light speed now. We're coming up at the top of the hour, another 10 minutes, but 8 minutes. I'd like to, before we get to the break, what is the connection with the extraterrestrials in your cosmology? How do you put in this?
As you know, that's very complicated and complex, and I know you guys really like Zachariah Sitchin and all of that. I'm a little bit more, I just say I don't draw strong conclusions. I totally know that, yes, there's these various ET factions that are involved there, and I do know that the cabal, the Armageddonists, were working on some ways with certain ETs, and there's been shifts and changes in that, but all of that is to me, it's speculation. And I'm happy to talk about speculation as long as I'm just saying that this is pure speculation. I really don't have the facts to back this up. But as you guys know, you put enough things together and it just all starts making sense. And yeah, the UFOs play a key role, and I think a part of it is the reason they don't come and make themselves known is because we'll turn them into gods. And I think, the ETs that are really trying to help us, they don't want to become gods. They want us to step into our own power. And once we embrace our own power enough, then it'll be natural that they will start to come and work with us more openly.
Yeah, I totally concur with that, Fred. It's basically, my studies of the Anunnaki is that we were designed to do better than they did. They were sick of war and one-upsmanship and murder within families, and they were hoping that we, compassionate, being partly Homo erectus, would do better than them.
Right. Yeah, and hopefully we will. You know, it's still developing right, and we're certainly not doing that good of a job in our history, but I think it is changing. I see signs all over the place that we're in a time of big shift and transformation, and there's every reason to hope that we can make the change and do a better job.
Yeah, I can say that some of the biggest changes in humanity is that humanity as a whole has said slavery is immoral and it should be stopped, even though it isn't. And women more and more are, in much of the world, demanding and getting the equality that's rightfully theirs.
Yes.
But the huge problem for me is how do you reach the people who are into murder underneath their need, their want to hurt other people? What is it? Is there some way that we can synergize with the needs of Islamists as well as everybody else?
Well, you know, I'll tell you that part of the problem is when you're brought up and sexually abused, when you're brought up or physically abused, it's really hard to change that anger that develops as a result. And what I'm so excited about is child rearing practices worldwide are becoming softer and kinder, so that children are being brought up with much less abuse, which means that there's going to be less people wanting to go out and commit crimes. And I think some of it is just the old generation dying off because there was a lot of abuse. You probably know, and some of it was on purpose. You probably know about all the satanic groups and all that kind of stuff that try to perpetrate this stuff. Now, all of that, I'm telling you that satanic groups are running scared because I don't know if you're following what's happening in England, but, you know, lately Prince Andrew has been implicated. Other top members of parliament are being implicated in these pedophile rings, and they are running scared. That's
we'll talk a little bit more about that and mind control, because that's what you say. Is mind control, yes.
Yeah, the mind control hasn't come out much yet, but the pedophile stuff will lead to that. You know, I think it'll take some time, but it's starting to unravel even as we speak.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what's been going on with the pedophile?
Sure.
Because I don't know how much they know.
Sure, yeah. Well, let me tell you first, so for anybody who's listening, if you go to www.wanttoknow.info, WANTTOKNO.info, you'll find there's all sorts of great information there. And along the top of the website, there's like a black bar with all the key topics. And if you go to the news section, there's a drop-down menu. And under the drop-down menu, there's quite a few topics. They're alphabetical. You can go to sex abuse scandals. And on the sex abuse scandals there, you'll see lots of articles showing how it's all coming out. The very first one talks about how the Pentagon, pornography is huge. Reported by CNN. An article by the CBS and the AP about predator priests shuffled around the globe. A lot of stuff around the Catholic Church. Forbes talks about government workers with ties to porn, and they have links to all of these, so you can actually go read the original articles. There's actually a Fox News article that says this title is "Recent Charges of Sexual Abuse of Children in Hollywood is just the tip of the iceberg."
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's all it is: sex abuse scandals, news articles, and it's searchable.
Yes, and then it starts. So, like the recent thing, if you scan down a bit, you'll see some things like there's a Telegraph article, and the Telegraph is one of the top newspapers in the UK. Westminster is their equivalent of the Congress. 5 Westminster pedophile rings probed by Scotland Yard, and it says there are at least 5 pedophile rings which involved members of Parliament. This is a quote.
Wow.
In the Telegraph.
Wow.
And this just came out on December 21st, less than a month ago. So I'm telling you.
So what is with the pedophile rings? What is the purpose of these adults, sexually abusing children?
Well, this has to do with the Luciferian and mind control and all that stuff.
Right.
Mind control, you create Manchurian candidates. Manchurian candidates almost always it involves sexual abuse. So Manchurian candidates, for those there's some who probably don't know, they are spies who don't know they're spies, people who've had their personality fragmented so that they have multiple personality disorder, and the core personality doesn't know about the other personalities which have been programmed to do various things. And this is all, I know it sounds out there, but go ahead.
Oh, no, we've heard about this before, but I just wondered from your perspective, we have about 1 minute before we go to the top of the break, if they're splitting people into their sub-personalities, this is all part of the mind control, so perhaps we'll cover this in depth when we come back from the break, but this is part of these pedophiles.
Yes.
And apparently
it's a key to understanding all that stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
so
I think
Pope has been implicated, even the current Pope, correct? Oh, we'll have to pause. We'll do this thing back. Thank you, everybody. Back in 5 minutes. Hello, hi everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com with your host, Janet Kira Lesson, and co-host Dr. Sasha Lesson, and we are interviewing Fred Burks. But before we go back to our interview with Fred, I want to remind everybody that Revolution Radio is listener-supported. So please do take a few moments right now and go over to the website and make your donation. $1, $5, $10, $15, $20, whatever you donate will be greatly appreciated. And we do thank you very much for your donation. We need your donations to continue to evolve and grow and expand and make this a bigger and bigger movement, which is going to take back our planet. Yeah. All right. Dr. Lesson, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'd like to say a little bit before we go on about the idea that the amelioration of corporal punishment in the raising of children, in other words, you stop beating your kids, stop hitting your kids, and stop neglecting them, is what has so been demonstrated as being less crime in society and less propensity to have violence against other people. It's two things, though. It's not just the and we've been talking about severe violence and where people are abused sexually and so forth. But just spanking itself, when you do punishment, the behavior that's punished is most likely to recur when the punisher isn't there. So if you want someone to keep doing something, you punish them. It's really dumb. So don't hit your kids. Hitting your kids makes them not as smart, not as spontaneous. It's such a lousy thing to do to your kids. And if you have an impulse to hit your kid, just say to yourself, what do you really need from this child? And you can get it in much more intelligent ways. So that's my little rap about stop violence. But the other half of it is allow easy and free, uninhibited sexuality among people of the same age. And if you do that, plus you have no violence, you're going to have a world of peace.
Back to you, Fred. Welcome back.
Thanks. And thanks for that, Sasha. I so agree that when kids are treated as really wonderful, loving beings, it's going to make it's already making a big shift. You see the whole indigo children thing coming up, which is one of the most exciting things happening on the planet. So, great stuff.
Great stuff. So we were looking, so when we ended, we were talking about the satanic ritual abuse and the mind control. Let's do a little bit on that, and then we're going to swing this around to the title of this show today is White House Interpreter Talks Transformation from the Heart. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to look a little bit more at mind control and how that affects us, and then we'll go into, in the last hour, this transformation process. So go ahead, Fred, take it away.
Sure, yeah. So a key piece, I'm sure you guys know this, but maybe not some of the listeners. If you really want to understand the big picture, what's happening here on planet Earth and in our lives, it's really important to understand the role that mind control has played. I find that mind control and the UFO question, or the ET question, are the two big things that most people don't know about that have a massive impact. So again, if you go to the website that I manage, which is wanttoknow.info, and there's a black bar along the top. Towards the right, there's one, it says mind control. And if you click there, it takes you to our mind control information center. And in the information center, we've got some amazing summaries. We've got links to news articles. We've got resources. We've got awesome videos. In fact, I'll just mention that there is a most amazing video produced by History Channel, which is titled Mind Control, America's Secret War. And that's a great primer. Oh, yeah, and we've got that posted on our website, so it's not going to disappear. We actually have the video. It's not on YouTube. So if you want to learn about this stuff, go to that mind control section and start exploring around. And believe me, that many people who have been programmed have contacted us, and I've had several people saying, you saved my life, because they were getting suicidal and didn't know what to do, and they found this information, and suddenly it started making sense. And one of the things we summarize? Yeah, one of the things, sorry?
Finish your sentence, and then I'll ask you a question. Go ahead.
Sure. One of the things that we do is we have links to the declassified government documents proving all this stuff. And we actually have the whole cache of declassified documents, which I got from the CIA through the Freedom of Information Act. It's all online on our website, so you can explore all this stuff. We also tell you how to order it from the CIA, just like we did, because don't expect you to believe me. Order it directly from the horse's mouth, from the CIA. For $20, or is it $30? I don't remember. You get 3 CDs filled with over 20,000 pages worth of documents on mind control, and you can prove for yourself that all this stuff is going on.
So what if you could summarize the whole mind control program, what is going on? What is the purpose of this? What is it doing? Who is it being directed at? Those types of things.
Okay, so if you want to think about the Machiavellian view of government, it's you want to be in control, and everything you can do to maintain control, you want to develop. And so mind control, of course, is a powerful technology, which they started learning about, in the 1900s with mesmerizing, was able to hypnotize people. And hypnosis is a key piece of mind control. And so even before World War II, they were developing techniques to cause split personalities. We have an article that shows how that was being used even in World War I to try to manipulate people. But what happened is along came World War II, and suddenly you have the Nazis and you have these concentration camps. And Dr. Josef Mengele, who's known as the Angel of Death at Auschwitz, had free reign to try to develop his mind control program. He could torture, maim, and kill people in any way he wanted to get the information that he wanted. And he basically perfected the art of mind control. And the way he did it is he would use it would drug them, so you get people in this really drugged state, and then once they're drugged, it's easy to hypnotize them. Some people can't be hypnotized very easily, but you put people on the right drugs and they get totally messed up. You can hypnotize them very easily, and then you torture them. You do those three, and it's so intense that a normal human consciousness cannot handle it. And what happens is they dissociate. Dissociate means the part of your normal consciousness just leaves, and another sort of personality is developed to handle the pain. And this is how they create a dissociative personality disorder. And what Mengele could do is he could take anybody. He could take you or me. And if we got brought into his office on one of these things, he'd put the drugs in us, hypnotize us, torture us, and you could walk out of that office 3 or 4 hours later not knowing what happened at all. You don't even remember anything that happened. And yet now you have 3 or 4 different personalities that he has programmed inside of you that he can access through code words and program to do various things. And although it sounds bizarre, it sounds like something out of science fiction, but we've got the government documents that show that this is what they're doing. So what happened? World War II ends. Where do you think Mengele ended up? He ended up working for the CIA.
Right.
they facilitated his escape to Argentina. There's very good evidence of this. There's not proof, but there's very good evidence that he was allowed to escape to Argentina. From there, he was given a false name and brought into the U.S., and he was the key architect of the CIA mind control program to create Manchurian candidates. Now, this, that there's not proof of that, but there's strong evidence. So, but there is proof that the program existed, that all these things were developed, that proof that they used torture, that they used drugs and hypnosis, and you can see the government documents. If you just go, for instance, if you go to that information center, the very first thing is our summaries. You can just go and read the 2-page summary, which lays this all out in just 2 pages, very concisely, but it also has links so that you can go read the individual government documents.
What about the media? Like what's coming through our television, our radio, our movies? Is there mind control there?
Well, that's a different kind of mind control, and yes, that certainly plays a role. That they flash images. It was actually made illegal to flash images in advertisements back, I think, in the 70s, because they used to do it all the time with subliminal processing. What we watch on television, it flashes 24 images a second, and each image is separate, but it all looks like a flow because our mind can't see that movement that fast. And so you just insert one image of, for instance, a naked woman with a Coca-Cola, and suddenly all the guys are wanting to drink Coca-Cola. But since it's only one image, your mind can't discern that. It cannot see that something just flashed across the screen in only one image. So this is a form of mind control that was used to promote products, but it also can be used to do weird things to our psyche. So yeah, that's a different aspect that's important to talk about. But the Manchurian candidate thing is where you can pull off a 9/11, because you have, let's say, you have these Arab terrorists who are actually your assets because you programmed them, and you can make them do whatever you want. And so and
they won't even know they did it.
Yes, and they're not even going to know they did it. They're thinking they're doing it for some religious holy cause, but they've been programmed to do that. And as I said,
we've had a number of people that have come forth and said, I came to, and I realized what was happening, and I got out.
Oh, yeah. There have been numerous whistleblowers. There are conferences around the country several times a year now that talk about this stuff. So it is getting out. The media won't touch it still. But it's out there, and there's reliable people. There's people with lots of PhDs getting together and talking about this, and it's coming out more and more. And again,
even Roseanne Barr. Roseanne Barr was at a conference. Roseanne Barr.
Right, yeah, Roseanne Barr is up on some of this stuff. Yes, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, so people coming forth with their mind control. And isn't the religion a form of mind control? Like
religion is fascinating because there's a lot of speculation that actually the formation of some of the religions may have involved ETs. Muhammad disappeared and was taken off into the heavens. That sounds a little bit like being taken off by a thing. And Moses and the burning bush. It's like, what was that burning bush all about? So, and if that was mind control, who was doing it? Was it the ETs, or what was going on? There certainly is an element of mind control, but there's also an element of truth. As in anything, there's elements of truth and there's elements of deception. And so, I grew up, my father was a minister. I grew up reading the Bible, and I could see the words of Jesus really touched me. But I could literally see in the Bible there's all this deception and craziness too. This very hateful God in the Old Testament that destroyed cities and stuff like that. It's like, if that's God, I'm not going to take him as my God. Thank you.
Well, that was my awakening too when I was a kid. It's like there's a lot of hypocrisy here, and my parents said read the Bible, so I came back and go, look, this guy God just killed 500 people in a tent and were just minding their own business and having a picnic. I don't think I want to follow this guy.
No, exactly. And yet the words of Jesus overall were pretty touching and powerful.
Yeah. So do you have any idea what was going on there with the ETs? Why would they be doing religious programming and creating this?
I'm sure you guys are aware that there are various factions of ETs, and the different factions have different agendas. And so, we could go on that for a while, but I don't know that that's the most important topic to cover.
why don't you tell us where you want to go?
I think bringing it back to the mind control, because if you understand the mind control, as I say, you can understand how false flag operations are pulled off so well, because the people carrying them out don't even realize. I just want to read you one quote from a CIA document, which you can find online. The document is dated February 10th, 1954. It's a CIA declassified document, and it describes an experiment on the creation of unsuspecting assassins. So here's the quote. Any names are deleted, so I'll say deleted when there's a name, so they black them out.
Okay.
It's redacted. So it starts, Miss Deleted was then instructed, having expressed a fear of firearms, that she would use every method at her disposal to awaken Miss Deleted, a second hypnotized subject, who is now in a deep hypnotic sleep. And failing this, she would pick up a pistol and fire it at Miss Deleted. She was instructed that she would not hesitate to kill. Miss Deleted carried out these suggestions, including firing the gun, which was unloaded, at Deleted. After proper suggestions were made, both were awakened. Miss Deleted expressed absolute denial that the foregoing sequence had happened. So this is a government document that anybody can order, and this is just a summary of it. I mean, it's much longer. But you see, they, by the way, they like to experiment with young women. And you think about, why were they using so many young women? They have hypnotized young women. Question mark.
Right, yeah.
What else were they doing with them? But anyway, they could get these young
women. One of the problems with this is that in hypnosis, we could certainly recover whatever happened, since in a hypnosis is when it was acquired.
Yes, but so what it is the program became very sophisticated, so that if somebody used hypnosis to try to uncover what was going on, they programmed in suicide programming, so that anybody who started to discover or remember would start feeling suicidal and would want to kill themselves. It's very sophisticated. And as I say, I am somewhat of that's my top area of expertise is mind control, and I'm in touch with experts around the country who've educated me of how all this works. And the programming that they do, they treat the mind like a computer. And they literally can create hundreds of personalities for different things. And they can, if this happens, then this will happen. So it's quite sophisticated. And, those who are interested can go in our mind control section, and you'll find an amazing amount of very reliable information on all this stuff. It's one of the best kept secrets because it's such solid information, yet the press won't touch it.
Wow.
So we have a guest that has a question, but I'll get to that later on. So let's stay with the mind control. So so they're doing this. What are they doing with these people that they mind control? Do you have any insights into that?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of kind of how it works. It's known that a lot of country western singers are mind controlled. So here you have these gorgeous young singers who, are known around the world, and they'll, let's say, go meet with the president of France. Well, they have a seductive personality, and so they're instructed to kick on their seductive personality, and they'll go to bed with the president of France, get him to reveal some secrets or whatever they want him to do, and then, they come back and they can report to their handler. The person who controls them is called their handler, and then they get the information they wanted, or they can manipulate him in that way. And the country western singer doesn't even know that she just got this information, and all that happened. So
they could be using a lot of celebrities that way.
Yes.
Because celebrities are welcome all over the world, and they have an inside track to go places that most people can't. They get invited to China, and they could go in, and so they're delivering messages. I read not Arizona Wild or the other one, Transformation
of America. Yes,
America.
Transformation
Kathy
of America.
O'Brien.
Yes, Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips. That was my introduction, and I read that book because I didn't know about all this stuff. And I read that book, and I went, "Oh my God, if this is true, we're really in trouble." And it's not the best book because you can't really verify anything. I mean, she tells like what the birthmarks are on the presidents and stuff, but you can't find that stuff out easily. It set me on a path of like, is this true? And I started investigating, like, oh my God, it turns out most of what they said there really is true. And you
so
find
what did you find that verified it? What kind of information?
Oh, lots. And this is what we have posted on our website. We have all the thousands of pages of documents. We have documentaries. There's an amazing documentary called Conspiracy of Silence that was supposed to air on Discovery Channel. Did you guys see that or hear about it?
No, I'll have to look at it. Is there a YouTube, or do you have a link to it?
We have that on our website. If you go to that, click on the mind control link in the black bar at the top, and you go to Best Mind Control Videos, and you'll see there it's called The Conspiracy of Silence. And this was a documentary that was it was supposed to air on the Discovery Channel. It was very professionally done. It's amazing. If you watch it, you go, wow, this is an amazing documentary. But when Congress, a few congressmen who were involved found out it was going to air, they started pulling things, and they had it canceled at the last minute, and they paid back the people who made it. And it talks about exactly how these pedophile rings are being used by people at top levels of government. It doesn't go as much. The other one, the one by the History Channel, goes into the Manchurian Candidate thing. The Conspiracy of Silence doesn't go into Manchurian Candidate, but goes into the pedophile rings that lead to the highest levels. So there's lots of great information that shows you how all this stuff is used. Now,
this opens up so much. The thing that kept coming to my mind was Monica sent by somebody who wanted to pull down Bill before he could do anything good.
Absolutely. Yes. You know, and Bill was compromised himself. I'm fairly certain that both the Clintons are mind controlled. I don't have proof of that, but there's a lot of evidence.
There's a lot of information that they've been cloned. There's some cloning going on. Have you heard about that?
I've heard about it, and I haven't found anything solid. I do believe it's possible. I just haven't been able to find something that I would consider really reliable on that. It makes sense, entirely possible, but I really don't know.
Well, when we look at the Kathy O'Brien incident, one of the things that was a trigger was the oral sex. They would perform oral sex, and then that would trigger their message coming through.
Sure. Yeah, there's lots of ways that they can set all that stuff up. But let me also say the cool thing about mind control is the same techniques can be used for powerful transformation.
Okay.
So really think about that. Anything like this, it's just a tool. So you can use hypnosis and even drugs to put people in altered state and then program positive things in them so that they can transform. I mean, hypnotherapy...
In holotropic breath work and entheogen work, and of course.
Yeah.
Meditation.
Yeah, meditation. Yes. This is the exciting thing. Hypnotherapy is an amazing tool. I'm actually a certified hypnotherapist, and I can tell you stories about how people's lives have been transformed because hypnotherapy allows your conscious mind to go into your unconscious and see what's there. And once it sees what's there, it's like, oh my God, now you have choice, where in the past you were run by certain programs. I mean, we all have certain traumas that we carry that set up unconscious behavior in us, so that in a way we're programmed by our traumas. Hypnotherapy can go in and undo those traumas. It's very exciting.
Right. So we come into our bodies, and we have these traumas that we're exposed to by our parents, who sometimes mean well, but they do things. We're subjected to their religious and cultural conditioning programming, and even patriotism is a form of programming to keep you separate from the apparent other and not seeing our oneness. So let's look at what are the transformation things that we can do. We have like about a half an hour left in the show.
Sure.
And I don't know if our listeners know that Dr. Lesson is a hypnotherapist and a
great
psychotherapist. And so we can talk a little bit about these techniques. So go ahead.
Well, I'll just mention
where you want to go with this.
So something I haven't mentioned, so I'm actually the executive director of a small nonprofit that runs 12 different websites. And wantsknow.info is the most popular. And many of the other websites are really focused on transformation. And we actually, 4 of the websites are free online courses that have amazing information, and people have just written rave reviews who've gone through the courses about how it's changed their lives. And The one I would recommend to people who are interested is we have an awesome lesson on mind control, which first presents the shadow aspect, which is what we've been talking about, and then the second half of the lesson goes into all of the powerful healing modalities. And to find that lesson, you can, again, go to wanttoknow.info and click on that Mind Control Information Center, and one of the choices there is Mind Control Online Lesson. And it gives you the link to that online lesson. And it's really a great lesson that just lays it all out. And as I said, the exciting part is it's titled Healing and the Deeper Perspective on Mind Control. It talks about, for instance, psychoactive drugs, which I'm sure you guys know now are being used for healing of trauma and deep psychological wounding. Biofeedback is another thing that people can start to learn to control bodily functions that are normally unconscious. Institute of Heart Math, I'm sure you guys know about, has been doing amazing work with how to deal with our biorhythms and how conscious control of that can improve our lives. Meditation, another powerful technique, and there's many different ways, and we have some links in this lesson to explore that. Relaxation techniques, hypnotherapy we've mentioned. There's just all these great things that are actually all under the rubric of mind control in the positive sense, because we're learning to train our minds to control our unconscious. And the difference with the old mind control is somebody else is in power or has power over you. Here we're empowering ourselves as individuals to go in and shift our unconscious aspects that don't serve us. So it's very, very exciting stuff.
Wow. Dr. Lesson, you have anything to add?
This is certainly consistent with the kind of work I do, which is called centering, coming out of Helen Sederstone and Carl Jung, which is to see what you about other people and understand that this is a part of yourself that's underdeveloped and resonating. Otherwise, you would be able to not be disturbed by other people. And so it's a process of centering yourself as you interact with other people. And whole cultures can do that too. And the trick is when you find a disowned personality part or a shadow part, is to be able to find out underneath its unreasonable wants, what does it really need? And is there a synergistic that we can meet that need as a global community and as a human being individual in his or her matrix? And I find that what you're saying is totally consistent with the way I work.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff, isn't it? I'm sure you've seen some of the things I have, and it's unbelievable, because stuff you would think you'd have to do, years and years of therapy to heal, you can actually, in a few sessions, like, whoa, just the knowledge that this happened, and boom, and suddenly they're a different person.
One of the most important things to start with is to say the way that I usually am serves me really great. That's my primary, but there's some vulnerable parts of me that I don't necessarily show other people, and there's even some instinctual parts that I have to that I regulate, and I want those parts to be able to contribute to my internal dialogue before I act in the world.
Yes, absolutely. And especially, I'm sure you know that, a big one is sex. We have a lot of unconscious urges around sex that get us in trouble. And when we bring those unconscious urges into conscious and make conscious choices, suddenly we have a much better sex life, which, guess what? If everybody's having good sex, nobody's going to want to go to war.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and you can go not just the dreams, but what do you daydream? That's where the sexual dreams come in. Is the part of you that daydreams, if you would just ask that part, the part that daydreams, what do you really need? Why do you want what you want? You're going to find out some real interesting things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. This is what's so exciting to me when you start talking about, like, even sexual transformation, which is just beginning on the planet, and I love that you guys are involved with that. Then, we're going to see huge changes in the morphogenic fields.
Well, sexual wounding is our biggest wound, and they use sex as manipulators. It's one of the biggest mind control systems on the whole planet, and they use shame against different sexual actions, and we basically are going to war because of the separation between the sexes and making females second-class citizens. So let's go to solutions. What do you think are some of the solutions that we can start implementing individually and collectively as societies to go past we've explored all this different mind control and conspiracy issues and in hundreds of shows now. We have 300 shows.
Right.
So what are some of the solutions?
I'll tell you an important thing for me, and I really suggest that everyone consider this, is that one thing we haven't talked about is, besides ETs, there are spirits that don't have bodies at all that are, I can call them spirit guides. And in my understanding, every one of us has spirit guides that are available to us, but they can only do so much unless we ask them for more help. And so if we ask our spirit guides for help, you can get answers, not directly, not like they speak to you in words, but you start getting little hints like, oh, I should do this and I should do that. So working with spirit guides is one powerful way that I've been able to move in the world. In fact, even
how
if I do...
How does one get to know if that's a good suggestion or a bad suggestion? If they're being led by mind control or they're being guided by their spirit guides?
That's a great question, Janet, because it's important. There are some disembodied spirits that don't have your best interests in mind. And so basically, you can demand that I only want spirits working with me who are going to support what really serves me and what really serves our worlds. And this is what I've done very clearly all along. It's like, if there's other spirits out there, for me, I'm fine with them watching, but I don't want them in my space and I don't want them controlling me. So we have sovereign control. And so I demand that only the spirits who are going to help me to grow and blossom as an individual and help me to better serve in this world work with me. And that way you keep the others.
People,
I find that it's really useful when you say, I'd like you to, a spirit guide, I'd like you to show me a representation, to show me yourself, and I'm going to pull on your face mask and see if you're really my spirit guide or whether there's another one underneath you. That's a little device that I find useful.
Cool. Yeah, and
well, isn't it true? Go ahead. Your next spread, and I'll say something.
I was just going to say that some people, that works better than others, but I've heard amazing stories of people who've done exactly that and had just miraculous things happen that show them like, okay, I'm on the right course.
So I wanted to talk about how people open themselves up to negative entities. From my understanding, it's when they're doing certain kind of drugs like cocaine and heroin or even alcohol. Let's talk about that a little bit. What are your thoughts on that, Fred?
Sure. I think what happens is when we put ourselves in compromised situations, that there are these spirits around who want to take advantage. It's like, ooh, let's go in and play here and take over this body or whatever. And so this is where I'm a big stand for being as conscious as you can be. And so when psychedelic medicines used for the right purpose can be very healing, but when they're used in the wrong way, it can be very, very damaging, which is why I understand why they're made illegal, even though I don't fully agree, because they can be so dangerous. But under the right conditions, they can be very helpful. But if you're just drinking to get drunk, well, of course, and I know not all of the listeners are necessarily going to believe in spirits, but just to understand that for me in my world, it's a part of reality that those spirits can come in and start messing with you. And are
spirits the same as extraterrestrials, or are they different? Are there aliens, extraterrestrials, interdimensionals? What's the difference?
Well, I mean, we're talking about, you have to talk about the different dimensions here, and that, there's fourth dimensional beings, fifth dimensional beings, and fourth dimensional beings can step down and become solid, like third dimensional physical. And so, but, generally the spirit guides that I work with and others work with are not ETs. They may have spent lifetimes on Earth or on other planets, but they're, I guess you could call it in between lives, or they're not doing the incarnating the physical plane anymore.
I'd like to be humans that have passed over. But go ahead, Sash.
Well, I'd just like to say it's well known in the literature that when you're in the throes of an addiction like cocaine or alcohol, that the spirits can enter you. But what I find is really useful is if you ask people that have a habit like that, and they can take responsibility. Say, I'd like to talk to your inner addict, a part of you that helps you alleviate your anxiety or feel high. When did you come into his or her life? How have you served them? What are your needs now? Are there alternative behaviors that you could engage in that, as the addict, to reduce his anxiety, that doesn't allow him to be taken over by external spirits? I find that kind of useful.
Yes, great stuff. Yeah, and realize that we all have aspects of ourselves. You can talk to yourself as a child. We do this in hypnotherapy and see what happened there and what are the needs of the child that were never met. But also, as Dr. Lesson was just mentioning, sometimes when we start getting into drugs like cocaine or something, a spirit may come in and start pretending like it's a part of you when it's not necessarily really a part of you. But when you address that spirit and work with it and see what its needs are, you can eventually get it to see how it's not serving either that being or the person, the host, and get them to leave. So it's amazing work.
Right.
I find you say, you too are of the light, and you have your own special light, and you can now leave this person. Do you have anything you want to say before you return to your own place in the light? And so let them have a final word and then send them off.
Yeah. So if I could
go ahead.
I want to mention one thing that I just briefly touched on, but it's kind of important. So let me first mention the home website that introduces all of the websites that I manage. It's peerservice.org. So it's www.peerservice.org, peerservice.org. And so if any of our listeners want to go there, you'll see we have 12 websites, and they're all on various aspects of either shadow work or transformation and things like that. But the thing I want to talk about is our online courses. Because what these online courses do is really they bring together the best of the internet. I and the people that I've worked with on this, we've gone and found all of the most heart and mind expanding materials out there which inspire personal growth and expand awareness so that we can improve our own lives and work together as powerful agents of transformation in the world. And so you'll see there's 4 different courses. There's one that's called the Inspiration Course, because some people are so overwhelmed in their lives they don't want to look at the shadow right now. And I honor that. If you're really overwhelmed, okay, maybe you want some inspiration. So the Inspiration Course is great for that. There's the Hidden Knowledge course. That's focused largely on the shadow work of the want-to-know.info kind of information. So if you're more interested in that, there's a course specifically for that. There's a course called the Insight course, which is, it masterfully weaves together a rich variety of topics which cover both inspiration and the shadow. And so by the time you finish this course, it's kind of a dance of light and shadow. You really understand that the shadow plays an important role in our lives. It's not a negative. Shadow doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And the transformation course is actually similar to the Insight course, but it's really for those who are on a deep spiritual journey. So if you're into spirituality and understand spirits and all that kind of stuff, the transformation course is the one you would love. It's also our most popular course. And it's all free. And my belief has been if I put this stuff out there free, people will still respond and give donations. And I can tell you, like, almost half the people who finish this course give a donation. And the average donation has been over $100. And one guy gave $6,000 after finishing one of the courses. So, people see the value in these things. I've had 3 people literally email and say, "You saved my life," and explain how I helped to save their life. And so it's like, wow. So invite people to check it out.
Are you the one that does all these websites, or do you have a team? It seems like an
I'm the
enormous
manager.
amount of work.
Yes, and I'm the manager, and there's been a team. There's people I've worked with on these. For the courses, there was 2 other people that worked closely with me, and we would have weekly meetings and put it all together. But yeah, I'm the main content manager. This is basically my life mission. I became really aware not long after my opening I told you about in 2001 in the ETs. I realized, whoa, this is what I came here to do. And so I've been very passionate, and my own belief is I want to make this information as widely as available as possible, so we don't charge for anything. We survive purely on donations. And in the beginning, I had saved up for retirement, and I said, screw retirement, I'm going to be my own benefactor. And so I volunteered for 7 years living off of my retirement, hoping that eventually I could get paid for this work. And now enough people are loving it and sending in donations that I actually make $48,000 a year doing this work.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So you're able to make a decent living
and I'm not charging for anything. It's all free. And so this is why I really encourage people to take a look and see if you're not inspired by some of the stuff there.
That's wonderful. So somebody finds that, I mean, how does somebody know if they're possessed or have some kind of attachment?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you what you said.
How does somebody know that they have like an attachment, that they are possessed, that they are
spirits.
mind controlled? Yeah.
You know,
like spirits. You say spiritual possession. Yes.
I think I'd defer to Dr. Lesson. You probably know better than me on that. I can get some.
I'd like to say, is there a part of you that's receptive to spirits? Would you tell me about that part? Would you be willing to move into that part? Any of the dominant primaries that would object? Do you have anything you want to say first? Okay, now would you let Sally move in? Sally, would you move into the part of you that's receptive to spirits? Part that's receptive to spirits. When did you come into Sally's life? What was happening then? How have you served her? What would you like her to hear? You know, and okay, thank you. Now we're going to have Sally go back to being in the center. And now Sally, thank you. Now Sally, stand up and become the witness. How do you see the Sally system working, and how does it integrate that part? And now would you take the place where I have been, and you will be your inner therapist. As inner therapist, could you discuss what Sally just did? And thank you. Now go back to the aware ego, the accuser. Thank you. Now back away from me. Anything you learned is just yours. It has nothing to do with me. Thank you. That was a nice session.
Beautiful. Wow. You just did a whole session in 2 minutes. That was awesome.
Everybody out there is healed. Hallelujah.
That is great.
Wow. Now, do you have, it's lovely you have all this online stuff. Do you have places where people meet and do something in person with this information?
You know, for the people who finish the course, we actually have an online portal where people can communicate with each other. And so that's reserved only for those who finish the courses, because they all have a certain knowledge in common, and they live all over the world. There are people that have gotten together as a result of this, some amazing synchronicities that have happened. We also do have some community forums for the various websites. I want to know if there's a readers forum where people can communicate with each other. There have been spontaneous groups that have gotten together, and I've had a few groups, but I haven't been able to make that happen in any significant way so far. As far as personally getting together in a sort of regular way. I would like to do that, and I've tried a few things, and so far haven't been too successful.
All right. Well, we haven't seen you in a number of years. What have you been doing between the last time we saw you, which was probably, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago now?
7 years ago, yeah, something like that.
What's been going on?
Doing, a lot of this, continuing to develop this internet work. What I'm really excited about now is, basically, as I mentioned to you, it really felt like this was my life mission. I'd always, from the time I was a kid, felt like I had a life mission. And once I got this, it's like, wow, it was exciting to me. And I was working 50, 60 hours a week for several years to get all this stuff going. But now that particular mission feels pretty complete. Even though I'll still continue to do this work, I really want to focus much more intensely now on healing the sexual wound on the planet. And so I plan to actually start another series of websites which will be separate about shining light into the shadows of sexuality and how to empower people to transform their sexuality, because it is so twisted in this world, as I'm sure you know, and the advertisements are just crazy. And so just by sharing simple practices, simple tools, simple ideas, people can start to transform their sexual lives. And it can be very exciting. And I've been doing that work on the side for a number of years, Tantra and things like that. but I really am making that more my main focus.
Fascinating. Well, we have worked in Tantra for many years, and we found that is the greatest wound is sexuality, and that's a lot of people coming to do counseling with us, therapy with us, and come because of their sexual wounds, and it keeps them from having successful relationships or even finding them in the first place. And so, tell us what you've been finding about what's the first step that someone would take if they are having, deep sexual wounds and they're not able to find love in their lives that last, or getting their dreams manifested. What's your advice to them on how to begin?
My advice to people would be to, as much as you can, be kind and gentle with yourself. People tend to beat themselves up around, like maybe they've done some terrible things in the past. And yeah, maybe it was terrible, but it's time to really start looking at that. And if you're feeling that it was terrible, that you can actually start to forgive yourself, look at what happened, and just start as best you can to be conscious and real. What happens is so many people want to please others that they end up sacrificing themselves or doing crazy things. And it's about trying to get as conscious as you can of your own sexuality, and then having the courage to talk about it with people. I was so impressed. One of my very first hypnotherapy sessions, a young guy came in, and he was having a weight problem. But he said he knew the problem was much deeper than there was emotional underpinnings. And he said, if I don't heal this, I'm afraid I'm going to abuse my own daughter. And he didn't have kids yet, but he thought he would. And the fact that he was willing to acknowledge that took such courage to me as a hypnotherapist to say, I'm afraid I'm going to abuse my own daughter. But, if we can start talking about that kind of stuff and say, wow, there's a part of me that could do terrible things sexually, and I need to get conscious of that, and invite our friends to help support us in talking about it, then it's not in the shadows anymore. And when it's in the shadows, all sorts of crazy stuff can happen because we don't have control over it. But when we shine light on it, it's not like you have control, but then you have choice. And so really realizing that yes, you have a choice. You always have a choice. And even if you're feeling like a strong urge for something, you can recognize, I'm having this strong urge. And what are you going to do? Are you going to just follow the urge, or are you going to pick up the phone and call a friend and ask for some help?
Well, a lot of times it starts because they were abused. So they act out. The body armoring is also, especially for women, it's like if they've been raped or molested, they develop body armoring and they become unattractive, so they won't become a victim again. Dr. Leslie, you have any thoughts on the sexual wounds of children? And that goes full circle with this ritual abuse. It's epidemic around the planet. What do you say about that topic?
I find it useful to include sexuality in the context of all the human endeavors, which I think of in the chakra system, so that within us, in our first chakra, if we can embrace our vulnerability and the part of us that guards the vulnerability, so that we have a choice in how vulnerable we are. That's the first chakra. And the second one, it's the sexual chakra, and that's very much like the heart chakra in a balance of being able to give and receive. The power chakra is next, being able to follow or lead, but and be appropriate in the context. In the heart, it's giving and getting and having some sense of reciprocity. Communication is, being able to talk or remain silent and sing, and that sort of thing, to be able to decide whether to maintain your privacy or blab, and your vision center. It's a matter of being able to embrace your intellect, your logic, and your intuition, and your deeper sense. And in terms of the top chakra, it's important for you to be able to open up so you can feel your oneness with other. And those are just the first 7 chakras, but much above that crown chakra. It's most important to embrace the clown chakra and realize it's all just a lot of fun.
Yes. Yeah, we get so serious sometimes. I get so serious sometimes, and I'm really wanting to invite more and more fun into my life, because it doesn't have to be serious. And sure, there's a time to be serious, but there's a time to be playful and have fun. And boy, the more we play, and I have to say, Dr. Lesson, I know him personally. He's such a fun, joyful man, and you just see he exudes this playfulness, and I'll take you as a mentor for that.
Yeah, Sasha's Peter Pan. He goes on a bike ride every day. Does about make sure he has fun every day, and so that is like our greatest revenge, I think. And amongst all this drama and trauma that the Illuminati or the powers that be or the governments or religions try to impose on us, that our greatest revenge is that we can stop and have fun and enjoy the ride. Yeah.
Yep. And remember,
so, Fred, go ahead.
I was just going to say, people get, when you go down the rabbit hole and you haven't gone down before, the first time, it is really scary. There's all this crazy stuff going on, and you realize how we're being manipulated, and it's natural to be angry, and also, but by the way, when you're angry like that, you can be manipulated more easily. So you want to be able to express the anger and move through it, and eventually get to a place like all three of us have, because we have our times when we were angry, and now we're like, okay, this is what's real, this is what's going on. I've accepted the new level of understanding, and now I have choice, and now I want to have fun, and now I want to see how I can play a role in having fun while I help to transform the whole planet. And boy, what a great privilege to do that.
And we were talking about the shadow and the importance of this shadow. And so there's a shadow individually. We have our things that or negative that happen to us, but we also have those Illuminati powers that be people that are playing the shadow role in the continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how, you just see it all as bad or good, but in some ways the shadow has created our civilization because we needed something to be in opposition to in order to create that which we want to embrace.
Right. Well, there's one really interesting essay called the Hidden Hand essay, which you can find on our website, where it's a guy who claims to be from the ruling elite of the planet. And he says basically what happened is humanity was kind of stuck and not growing. And so they needed a good kick in the butt to start learning and growing. And so all these souls who are actually pretty evolved souls volunteered to play the bad guys. And they came in to stir things up so that you guys can learn and stop being so, the Garden of Eden is beautiful, but you're not growing. Do you really want it to all just be like, the tree falls down and we just, sit and hang around, maybe make love? You're not growing if you're doing that. So we need the shadow and we need the challenges in order to grow and expand and to get excited about life.
Yeah, I would concur entirely from the perspective, my perspective. It's what the disrespect for consciousness, that is the evil that upsets you the most. It gives you purpose and direction in life. So if injustice, say, for example, women being dissed, is what really upsets you, then your purpose becomes justice. If ugliness is what terribly bugs you, then beauty becomes your purpose. And so the blessings underneath the things that distress you show you what you need to develop, and it's like the scratches in your cosmic egg that let you expand beyond that shell, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And the main thing is to just get clear on what you want in your life. Like, what are your values? What are your priorities? And maybe even write them down. I have one actually posted on my wall right next to my bed here, so I can look and remind myself, this is what I really want in life. And it's not set in stone. You can change it. I change these regularly. But if you follow your values, follow your priorities, your life will start to fall into place, and you can have more fun.
So this transformation, if we all embrace this, is there like a critical mass? How do we go from this, the sky's falling, we're going to have a global economic collapse, we're going to have World War III, to this transformation?
People talk about the tipping point where, when a certain amount happens, suddenly everything is going to change. Or would they say the mothership's going to come down and save us all, or Jesus Christ is going to come back and save us all. I've never bought into that. I've never bought into sudden transformation. I mean, yes, things can happen rapidly, but I think every one of us, every step makes a difference. And if we stop waiting for somebody to save us and instead work on saving ourselves by taking each step, and sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but we keep going, we follow our priorities, we follow our values, and just know to keep moving, then boom, it's going to happen gradually, and you'll look around and look at where you were 10 years ago, which I do now. It's like, oh my God, I've gone so far in 10 years because I've taken so many steps. And that's how it's done. It's a gradual process.
Yeah, I think that's the gauge. Just taking a look back. We usually do a life review every year. We haven't done it this year, but if you take a look back at your life, and
yes.
you may think you're not making any progress, but if you look back, you go, wow, look who I was. Look what was going on then and where I am now.
I do the same thing. I write actually a summary at the end of each year. When I go back, I keep a short diary. Every day I write for about 10 or 15 minutes about the key things of that day. At the end of the year, I go read back. It's like, oh my God, I forgot about all this. Sometimes I feel like, oh, I didn't do that much this year. But I go and read and like, oh, I did all sorts of great stuff. So it's really fun to look back 1 year, look back 5 years, look back where you were 10, 20 years ago.
Yes. Tosh, you have any questions?
No, just that I just think it's useful to imagine you can see yourself as becoming as enlightened and wise as you possibly can. Perhaps standing on a mountain peak, and imagine that you walk up to yourself as you stand there, and you go behind your own eyes there, and you experience yourself from that peak, and you look back at that only you could accomplish those stopping points along the way as you got to this peak. That might be a good thing to think about this weekend.
Absolutely. And I'll also invite people to open to the possibility that there's infinite potential inside of you. There's infinite potential inside of every one of us. And when we support each other in opening to that infinite potential, then the sky's the limit. We can create whatever we want in our lives. I have to say, I'm thrilled that I love my life now. Even though I know about some of the deepest, darkest craziness going on, I love my life. I love my connections. I love the fact that I get to connect with Janet and Sasha right now in this powerful interview, and that all of you guys are listening and having a great time. It's like, wow, we get to do this together. So do the work and have fun while you're doing it, and then we can play like this.
I love rapping with you, Fred.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. I have one question. This might be a good way to end it. Olive 2M asked, then who is really running the world in detail? Fred, who's running the world?
I love that question. You know, I do a lot of interviews, and I love it when people ask me, so who's really behind it all? And I have a great answer. You guys might even be able to guess what it is. I know who's running it all, and the answer is you.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is every one of us creates our own reality. Now, you don't necessarily create what happens to you, but by how you respond to what happens, you create your reality. How you respond to what happens to you ends up creating your experience of reality. And you have choice how you respond. And so you are incredibly powerful in creating your life. And when you really get this and start making better choices, life's going to get better for you, guaranteed.
Well, we see people like they have two people having an ET abduction experience. Mm-hmm. One sees it as a positive, and the other one sees it as a negative. I think a lot of people are suffering from the cat at the vet syndrome. You know, if you interview my cat after the vet, she's going to say, that was horrible.
The vets are evil, and don't go see a vet, right?
Yeah, right. So I think that's what you're saying is your perception creates your reality. Isn't that part of thoughts or needs? And that if you fine-tune your perceptions, you can actually, once again, shift the morphogenic field and create a more positive reality for yourself and for your loved ones and everybody. That's my thoughts. Okay, we have 2 minutes. I guess I'll Josh, you have anything to say? Then we'll let Fred take.
Okay, remember, I totally agree with Fred. You are the chooser. You are the chooser. Understand that whenever you're identified with something, automatically reach out and embrace the opposite. You think you're kind, then be for the part that's hard too, and then be in the center between kind and hard, and assess your situation from a fair witness and decide what's appropriate. So that remember, you are the chooser, and there's parts of you that aren't in complete agreement. As a matter of fact, disagreement within you, if you can embrace both the disagreeing sides, will give you a much bigger perspective.
Yes. Embrace all of yourself, and then just do your best. Love it.
Okay. Love it.
I love you guys.
Well, thank you. We love you too. And thank
all of our
you
listeners
for joining us this week. And what's the website one last time, Fred?
Okay.
Okay. It's online here. Aloha, love, and blessings.
Aloha.
Listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Who owns you? If you're not in control, then someone else is. Join me, Ivy West, for Voices on the Wind, Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern in Studio A. I discuss government, health, metaphysics, suppressed science, universal mysteries, little-known incredible facts, alternative energies, and even more than you can imagine. Won't you join us on Revolution Radio Saturdays from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern for Voices on the Wind with me, Ivy West.
There are lives in the balance, people under fire, children at the cannons.
Because if your head's in the sand, your tail is a target.